Can $1 billion truly buy a man's way into heaven? Or is it just the ultimate tool to bury a hellish secret? They say money can't buy happiness, but in the case of Father Silas Thorne, it bought something much more valuable: redemption. Or at least the appearance of it. Imagine a man who holds the keys to a tech empire worth billions in one hand, and the Holy Bible in the other. He is the saint of Silicon Valley, a man who traded his corporate suits for a priest's collar, claiming he found God in the middle of his success. But for Queen, Silas Thorne isn't a saint. He isn't a savior. To her, he is the recurring nightmare that has haunted her every waking hour for the last 3 years. We see Queen now. She isn't the broken girl from 3 years ago. She is standing in the middle of a private, candlelit sanctuary inside a sprawling $50 million estate. Her breath is shallow. Across from her stands Silas. The silver cross around his neck catches the light, mocking the darkness in his eyes. "I know it's you," Queen whispers, her voice shaking but her resolve like iron. "I remember the way you spoke that night. I remember the coldness in your tone." Silas doesn't flinch. He slowly closes his prayer book, the leather creaking in the silence. He steps into the light, his billionaire priest persona slipping just enough for the predator beneath to show. "Queen," he says, his voice that same haunting velvet gravel she's heard in her dreams. "In this house, I am the one who hears confessions, not the one who gives them. But how did we get here? How did a girl who lost everything end up as the personal assistant to the man who took it? 3 years ago, Queen was a rising star with a scholarship and a future. One night changed everything. She was left with nothing but trauma and a voice burned into her memory. A voice she never thought she'd hear again. Fast forward to today. Queen is drowning in debt, working 3 jobs just to keep her family's home. When a high-paying executive assistant role opens up for a prominent religious figure, she thinks it's her lucky break. She thinks it's her path to a better life. She has no idea she's walking straight into a golden trap. The world sees a man of God. Queen sees a man of greed. The world sees a billionaire who gives to the poor. Queen sees a man who steals souls. This isn't just a job for her anymore. It's a mission. She's forced to work for him, forced to see his holy life up close, all while the romantic tension begins to pull at her in ways she hates to admit. Because Silas is magnetic. He is brilliant. And he is watching her every move with an intensity that feels dangerously like passion. Is he truly seeking forgiveness, or is his priesthood the ultimate cover for a crime that never went away? As Queen digs deeper into his empire, she realizes that the saint has been keeping tabs on her long before she ever applied for this job. This is a story of wealth, betrayal, and a revenge that tastes sweeter than any prayer. But what you're about to discover in this next hour will change how you think about success, and the price of a secret, forever. Before we begin this incredible journey, I want to welcome you to the channel. I want to be honest with you. This video took much time to research, good time to write, and quality time to produce. Every detail of Queen and Silas's story was carefully crafted to bring you the most compelling, emotional version of this journey. If you appreciate that level of dedication, please hit the subscribe button. It truly means the world to me and helps me continue creating these in-depth, high-stakes stories for you. Before we reveal what Queen found in Silas's private vault, have you ever wondered what separates those who build lasting wealth from those who lose everything? Is it hard work, or is it something much darker? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Back to the night Queen's world shattered, and the moment she first stepped foot into the lion's den. Queen grew up in a house that smelled like motor oil and old books, never imagining that one day, she'd be forced to share a roof with a man who stole her soul. To understand where Queen is now, we have to go back to who she was before the world broke her. She wasn't always the guarded, silent woman she is today. 3 years ago, she was a 20-year-old fireball with a full scholarship to St. Jude's University. Her father, a hard-working mechanic, and her mother, a primary school teacher, had scraped together every penny to ensure Queen had a shot at a life they never dreamed of. They called her Queen not out of ego, but because they believed she was destined for a throne of her own making. She was at the top of her class, studying international law, with an internship lined up at a top-tier firm. Life was a series of late-night study sessions and hopeful morning coffees. Until the night of the Sapphire Gala. It was supposed to be a night of networking. Queen was working as a high-end server to help pay for her textbooks. The venue was a glass-walled penthouse overlooking the city, a place where the air felt thinner and the people felt like gods. Among the sea of black ties and silk gowns, she felt out of place, but determined. That was when she first felt his presence. He wasn't a priest back then. He was just a shadow in a darkened VIP lounge. A man whose face was obscured by the dim light, but whose power filled the room like a physical weight. She remembers the coldness of the champagne he ordered. She remembers the way he looked at her, not as a person but as a curiosity. And she remembers the end of that night. The way the music faded into a terrifying silence. The way the city lights blurred into a smear of cold white. But most of all, she remembers his voice. It wasn't loud. It was a low, resonant baritone that vibrated in his chest, a voice that whispered things that made her skin crawl, things that stayed with her long after he was gone. When Queen woke up the next morning, her scholarship was gone. Her reputation was in tatters. A mysterious benefactor had pulled her funding, and a series of false allegations led to her expulsion. She was left with a mountain of medical bills and a family that was falling apart under the weight of the scandal. Fast forward 3 years. Queen is living in a cramped, 2-bedroom apartment in the industrial district. Her father's shop is closed, and her mother is battling an illness they can't afford to treat. Queen is working 3 jobs, a waitress by day, a data entry clerk by night, and a cleaning lady on weekends. She is drowning. Until the letter arrives. It's an ivory envelope, heavy and expensive. The return address reads, Thorne Philanthropies. The offer is staggering. $250,000 a year. Full medical benefits for her entire family. Housing provided. The role, personal executive assistant to Father Silas Thorne. Queen has heard the name. Everyone has. Silas Thorne was the golden boy of Silicon Valley, a billionaire who stepped down from his CEO position at the age of 29 to take a vow of priesthood. He is the world's most famous paradox. A man with a private jet and a Roman collar. It's a miracle, her mother whispers, clutching the letter to her chest. It's a trap, Queen's gut tells her. But looking at her mother's pale face, she knows she doesn't have a choice. Queen arrives at St. Silas's Reach, a 50-acre estate that looks more like a modern fortress than a rectory. The gates are wrought iron, topped with gold crosses. The driveway is lined with black SUVs that cost more than her parents' house. The interior is a temple of excess. Marble floors that shine like glass, walls adorned with Renaissance masterpieces, and a silence so thick it feels like a warning. She is met by the head of staff, a man named Marcus who speaks in hushed tones. The father values privacy above all else, Marcus warns. You will manage his schedule, his charities, and his personal correspondence. You will never enter his private chapel unless invited. And you will never, under any circumstances, record his image. For the first week, Silas is a ghost. Queen works from a high-tech office on the 2nd floor. She sees the impact of his wealth, the millions of dollars moved with a single signature to build hospitals and schools. She starts to wonder if the world is right. Maybe he is a saint. Maybe he's the man who can help her forget the past. Then comes the rainy Tuesday. The power flickers in the estate, and the digital systems go down. Queen is forced to take a physical file to Silas's private study. The door is slightly ajar. The room is filled with the scent of expensive sandalwood and the faint metallic tang of rain. A man is standing by the window, his back to her. He is wearing a black cassock, tailored perfectly to a frame that is far more athletic than any priest should be. He is on the phone. And then he speaks. I don't care about the optics, Marcus. If the girl wants more money to stay silent, give it to her. Everyone has a price for their soul. The world falls away. Queen's heart hammers against her ribs like a trapped bird. That voice. It isn't just similar. It's the exact same frequency. The same gravelly commanding tone that has echoed through every nightmare she's had for 3 years. She drops the file. The papers scatter across the marble floor like white feathers. The man turns around slowly. The light from a lightning strike outside illuminates his face. He is hauntingly handsome, with high cheekbones and eyes the color of a stormy sea. He looks at her, not with the kindness of a priest, but with the cold, calculating gaze of the billionaire who ruined her life. "You must be the new assistant," he says, stepping toward her. His voice is even deeper in person. "Queen, isn't it? I've been expecting you." He knows her name. He's been expecting her. And as he reaches down to help her pick up the papers, his hand brushes hers. The contact is electric, a mix of pure, unadulterated fear and a spark of something Queen refuses to name. She realizes then that she isn't just working for a billionaire priest. She is living in the den of the wolf who hunted her down 3 years ago. And the most terrifying part? He doesn't look like he regrets a single thing. Queen is now trapped in a world of luxury built on the ashes of her own life. She has the choice to run and lose everything, or stay and find a way to make a saint bleed. But as she gets closer to Silas, she begins to realize that the secrets of 3 years ago are even darker than she imagined. If you were born into Queen's circumstances, broke, and suddenly face to face with the person who destroyed you, do you think you would have made the same choices? Would you take the money and the job to save your family, or would you run as far away as possible? Let me know what you think in the comments. The sound of a voice can be a weapon, but for Queen, it was a death sentence she had to sign every single morning just to keep her family alive. When Silas Thorne turned around in that dimly lit study, the air didn't just leave the room, it felt like it left the planet. Queen stood frozen, the scattered papers at her feet looking like a shattered mirror of her own life. 3 years of therapy, 3 years of nightmares, and 3 years of trying to rebuild her soul were dismantled in 3 seconds. Silas didn't look like a monster. That was the most terrifying part. He looked like a masterpiece. His priest's collar was crisp, his emerald eyes were calm, and he moved with the grace of a man who had never known a day of guilt in his life. "You're trembling," he observed. His voice was that same velvet gravel. It vibrated through the floorboards and up through Queen's shoes. "Is the house too cold for you, Queen?" I should run, she thought. I should scream. I should take one of those expensive crystal decanters and break it over his head. But then, she thought of her mother. She thought of the $250,000 contract sitting on the desk. She thought of the eviction notice taped to her father's garage door just last week. She swallowed the bile in her throat and forced her hands to stop shaking. She knelt to pick up the papers, her heart hammering so loud she was sure he could hear it. "I'm fine, Father," she lied, the word father tasting like ash in her mouth, just a bit overwhelmed by the grandeur of the estate. Silas stepped closer. He didn't help her. He simply watched her, his presence looming over her like a storm cloud. "Wealth is a burden," he said softly. "But it is a burden I have chosen to carry so others don't have to. I hope you're prepared to carry it with me." The next few weeks were a descent into a gilded purgatory. Queen's initial response was pure survival. She avoided eye contact. She kept her responses brief. She moved through the mansion like a ghost, doing her job with a surgical, icy precision. But the obstacles were everywhere. Silas didn't just want an assistant. He wanted a companion. He insisted she join him for theological discussions over dinner. He demanded she accompany him to high-stakes board meetings where he moved billions of dollars with the stroke of a pen. Every time he spoke, Queen felt the phantom pain of 3 years ago. Every time he brushed past her in the hallway, she had to fight the urge to flinch. But she had a secret weapon: observation. She began to notice things. Small cracks in the saintly facade. Silas didn't eat like a man of God. He ate like a man who enjoyed the finest things in life. He didn't pray in the chapel. He sat in there for hours in total silence, staring at a blank wall. And then there were the donations. Queen was in charge of the digital ledgers. She saw the money flowing out to orphanages and hospitals, but she also saw administrative fees being diverted to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands under a shell company called the Sapphire Group. Sapphire, the name of the gala where her life was destroyed. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Silas hadn't just changed his career. He had used his billions to build a fortress of holiness to hide the very empire that funded his crimes. Queen's momentum began to build, but so did the danger. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was an infiltrator. She started waking up at 3 a.m. to scour the digital servers, using the IT skills she'd taught herself while working that data entry job. She found emails, encrypted files, records of other women who had disappeared or been paid off 3 years ago. Silas wasn't just a lone predator. He was the head of a network. But as she dug deeper, Silas began to change his tactics. He became attentive. He started leaving small gifts on her desk, a first-edition law book she'd once mentioned, a bouquet of her mother's favorite lilies. "You have a very sharp mind, Queen," he told her one evening as they sat in the library. "It's a waste for you to be just an assistant. You see things others miss. You see me." The way he said it sent a chill down her spine. Did he know? Was he playing with her? This hardship revealed a side of Queen she didn't know existed. The girl who was once a fireball was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating strategist. She learned how to lie without blinking. She learned how to manipulate the estate's security protocols. She even found an unlikely ally in Marcus, the head of staff. One night, while they were closing down the kitchen, Marcus leaned in and whispered, "Be careful, girl. The higher the pedestal, the harder the fall, and he'll pull anyone down with him to break his landing." Queen realized then that she wasn't the only one who hated the saint, but she was the only one with the keys to his kingdom. The breaking point came when Queen's mother called. She was crying. The doctors had found a match for her treatment, but it required an upfront payment of $50,000. Money Queen didn't have yet. That same night, Silas called Queen into his private quarters. He was sitting by the fireplace, a glass of expensive bourbon in his hand, a clear violation of his priestly image. "I know you need the money, Queen," he said, not looking at her. "I know about your mother. I've already authorized the payment to the hospital." Queen felt a surge of relief followed immediately by a wave of pure terror. He was buying her. He was paying for her mother's life with the blood money he'd made from her trauma. "Why?" she whispered. Silas stood up and walked toward her. He stopped just inches away, the scent of sandalwood and bourbon overwhelming her senses. He reached out and tucked a stray hair behind her ear. His touch was terrifyingly gentle. "Because," he whispered, "I think you're the only person in this world who can actually save me. Or destroy me. And I'm curious to see which one you'll choose." In that moment, Queen realized the game had changed. Silas wasn't just her attacker. He was her benefactor. He was the man saving her mother's life, and the man who had ruined hers. He offered her a choice, total loyalty and a life of unimaginable wealth and power by his side, or the truth, which would save her soul but leave her mother to die. The walls of the estate felt like they were closing in. Queen was no longer just a prisoner of the past. She was a prisoner of the present. Every dollar Silas spent on her family was a link in the chain keeping her silent. At this point, Queen had to choose between option A, stay silent, accept the wealth, and save her mother's life, or option B, risk everything to expose the saint and face the possibility of losing the only family she has left. What would you have done? This decision would define everything that came next. Let me know in the comments. Your choice might be harder than you think. How do you fight a man who is literally paying for your mother's heartbeat with every breath she takes? For Queen, the weeks following her mother's surgery were the most harrowing of her life. The $50,000 payment for the initial procedure was just the beginning. The specialized aftercare, the private nursing, and the experimental medications totaled another $12,000 every single week. Silas Thorne didn't just pay the bills. He made sure Queen saw the receipts. He left them on her desk, tucked inside leather-bound folders, as if they were holy relics. It was a psychological masterclass. Every time she looked at the evidence of his crimes, the encrypted files of the Sapphire Group, she had to look at the monitor showing her mother's stabilizing vitals. The isolation began to set in. Silas fired Marcus, the head of staff and Queen's only ally, under the guise of a security restructure. Now, the estate felt like a silent, marble-lined coffin. Queen spent her nights in the library, the weight of the silence pressing against her ears until they rang. She hit her breaking point on a Tuesday night. She found herself standing in the middle of her luxury suite, staring at a designer dress Silas had bought for her. It cost $8,500. More than her father made in 4 months at the garage. She felt a sudden, violent urge to shred it. She was being groomed, bought, and buried in gold. But the true darkest moment came when she discovered the Thorne Miller file hidden in the back of a physical safe in Silas's study. Inside was a photograph from 15 years ago. It showed a younger, smiling Silas Thorne standing in front of a modest auto shop. Next to him was Queen's father. The documents revealed a devastating truth. Her father's business didn't just fail because of bad luck. Silas's parent company had systematically predatory priced the local market, driving her father into a $200,000 debt that eventually forced him to sell his soul and his land to Thorne Tech. The random encounter at the Sapphire Gala wasn't random at all. Silas had been circling her family for over a decade. He hadn't just destroyed her life that night. He had been architecting her family's downfall since she was a child. Most people would have broken. Most would have taken the money and hidden in the comfort of the lie. But this was the moment Queen refused to quit. The despair turned into a cold, vibrating fury. She didn't shred the dress. She put it on. She realized that to destroy a billionaire, you can't fight from the outside. You have to become the very thing they fear most. Someone who knows their value and refuses to be sold. She began using her access to the estate's mainframes during Silas's meditation hours. She developed a new strength, a poker face that could rival any high-stakes gambler. She learned the rhythms of the house, the blind spots in the security cameras, and the passwords to the offshore accounts. While Queen was building her digital bomb, Silas was building his public pedestal. He was being nominated for the Global Peace Prize. The world's media was descending on the estate for a televised profile. The priest who gave it all away, the headline screamed. The contrast was sickening. Queen would watch him give an interview about the sanctity of the human spirit in the garden. Then she would see him in a library, coldly ordering the disposal of legal threats from other victims. Do you think Queen should have taken the file she found and run to the police immediately? Or was staying to uncover the full depth of her father's connection to Silas the only way to truly win? Share your perspective below. I'm curious to see who would have played it safe and who would have stayed for the kill. The parallel developments were reaching a fever pitch. Silas's rivals in the tech world were sniffing around, sensing blood in the water but unable to find the source. They saw Queen as just another devoted assistant, a piece of the furniture in Silas's holy temple. But Silas was starting to watch her differently. The saint was beginning to show signs of obsession. He stopped talking about theology and started talking about their future. You're the only one who doesn't look at me with either greed or worship, he told her one night, cornering her in the wine cellar. The smell of expensive grapes and damp stone filled the air. Everyone else wants something from me. You want to destroy me. And that is the most honest relationship I've ever had. He reached out, his hand hovering near her throat, not in a threat, but in a hauntingly intimate gesture. If I told you that everything I did, the garage, the gala, the priesthood, was all a path to bring you here, would you believe me? Queen felt the heat of his breath, the terrifying magnetism of a man who believed his own lies. She realized then that Silas wasn't just a criminal. He was a fanatic. He didn't just want her silence. He wanted her love as a form of ultimate absolution. The seeds of his downfall were planted that night. Queen realized Silas's ego was his greatest weakness. He wanted to be saved by the woman he ruined. So she began to play the part. She began to whisper the things he wanted to hear, all while the upload bar on her hidden laptop reached 98%. The final confrontation was no longer an if, but a when. The world was coming to the estate for the Peace Prize announcement, and Queen was ready to give them a very different kind of show. The saint thinks he has found his queen. He thinks the $500,000 he spent on her family has bought her soul. But as the cameras start to roll and the lights of the world turn toward Silas Thorne, Queen is about to show him that some debts can only be paid in fire. Pause. We're at the midpoint of this incredible story, and the stakes couldn't be higher. If you're still here, watching Queen navigate this den of lions, I genuinely appreciate you. This story has so many layers. What's kept you engaged so far? Is it the mystery of the Sapphire Group? Or are you waiting to see the moment Silas finally realizes who he's been sleeping under the same roof with? Let me know in the comments. They say a predator can always spot another, but Silas Thorne was so blinded by his own holiness that he didn't realize he had invited a shark into his private waters. The moment the progress bar on Queen's laptop hit 100%, the power dynamic in the Thorne estate shifted forever. She didn't just have files. She had the digital DNA of every crime Silas had committed to build his empire. But Queen knew that simply leaking the data wasn't enough. A man with $1 billion can buy the best PR firms in the world to spin a leak into a conspiracy. To destroy a god, you have to do it in front of his worshippers. Queen's transformation wasn't just mental. It was strategic. She stopped being the assistant who flinched and started being the woman who commanded. She began taking over the day-to-day operations of the Thorne Miller Foundation, a $500 million charitable arm of Silas's empire. She wasn't just filing papers. She was making calls, approving grants, and building a network of her own. The most significant breakthrough came when she reached out to Leo Vance, the former COO of Thorne Tech who had been silenced 3 years ago with a $10 million NDA. Using Silas's own encrypted accounts, Queen found the kill switch in Vance's contract. She met him in a secluded corner of a rainy park, offering him something more valuable than money: vindication. "He's not a priest, Leo," Queen whispered, her voice no longer shaking. "He's a vault. And I have the combination." Seeing the fear in the eyes of a powerful man like Vance turn into hope was the first time Queen felt she was winning. She was no longer a victim. She was an architect of justice. While Silas was busy preparing for the Global Peace Prize Gala, Queen was expanding her influence. She used the Foundation's resources to quietly settle the debts of the other women she'd found in the Sapphire Group files. She was building a silent army. In the public eye, Queen was becoming a star in her own right. The media began to take notice of the brilliant woman behind the saint. She was featured in Business Insider and the Philanthropy Journal. She was no longer the help. She was the face of the Thorne brand. And then there was the recovery of her parents. Her mother's health had returned to near perfection, and Queen had used a mystery scholarship fund to pay for her younger brother's tuition at Stanford. Her father was back in a garage, not as a mechanic for hire, but as the owner of a new state-of-the-art facility Queen had secretly funded through a shell company. Seeing her father's pride restored was the ultimate victory. It proved that while Silas had stolen their past, he couldn't own their future. But the most dangerous part of this transformation was her relationship with Silas. He was spiraling into a deep, obsessive trust. He gave her the master passkeys to his private vault, believing her loyalty was a sign that he had been truly forgiven by God. "I used to think the world was my congregation," Silas told her one night, pouring a $2,000 bottle of scotch as he watched the sunset from the balcony. "But now, I realize you are the only one whose judgment matters. When I stand on that stage tomorrow to accept the Peace Prize, I want you by my side. Not as an assistant, as my wife." He pulled a velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a 15-carat blue diamond, valued at $2.4 million. It was a sapphire ring, a sick, twisted tribute to the night he ruined her. Queen looked at the ring, then at the man the world called a saint. She felt a wave of nausea, followed by a surge of icy clarity. She realized Silas didn't love her. He loved the idea that he could buy her forgiveness and turn his greatest sin into his greatest trophy. "It's beautiful, Silas," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "It's exactly what we deserve." Silas was completely unaware of the transformation. To him, Queen was the ultimate proof of his redemption. He began to delegate everything to her: logins, speech drafts, guest lists. He was handing her the matches while she was standing in his powder keg. She spent the final 48 hours before the gala coordinating with a team of investigative journalists from the Global Times. They had the data. They had Leo Vance's testimony. They had the bank statements from the Cayman Islands. All they needed was the live moment. Queen was no longer just a character in Silas's story. She was the one holding the pen, and she was about to write the final chapter in front of a global audience of millions. The stage was set. The grand ballroom at the Pierre was decorated in white and gold. The cameras were positioned. The world's elite were in their seats, ready to witness the saint receive his highest honor. Queen stood in the wings, wearing a dress that cost more than her family's old house, clutching a tablet that held the power to dismantle a billion-dollar lie. She looked at Silas, who was adjusting his collar in the mirror, looking every bit the holy man. He looked at her through the reflection and winked. "Are you ready to change the world, Queen?" "You have no idea," she replied. The transformation was complete. Queen was no longer the girl from the garage or the server from the gala. She was a woman of immense power, standing at the edge of a cliff, ready to push the man who thought he was a god. But as the music began to play and Silas stepped onto the podium, Queen realized that the truth wouldn't just set her free, it would change the lives of everyone in that room forever. At this point, Queen has transformed into someone completely different. She has the wealth, the power, and the trust of her enemy. Do you think people can truly change, like Silas claims he has? Or does our core nature always stay the same? Would you be able to keep a straight face and accept that ring just to finish the plan? This decision is crucial for what comes next. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The most expensive lies are always told from the highest pulpits, but Queen was about to show the world that even a billionaire sanctuary isn't soundproof. The grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was a sea of shimmering silk and silent power. Over 500 of the world's most influential figures sat in rapt attention. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and the hum of a dozen television cameras broadcasting live to millions. This was the moment of Silas Thorne's ultimate ascension. The Global Peace Prize ceremony. Silas stood behind the mahogany podium, looking every bit the modern saint. His black cassock was charcoal silk, his silver cross catching the spotlight. Beside him, Queen stood in a gown of midnight velvet, the $2.4 million sapphire ring heavy on her finger, a Trojan horse disguised as jewelry. Silas leaned into the microphone, his gravelly voice echoing with practiced humility. "Peace is not the absence of conflict," he began, "but the presence of atonement." Queen felt a chill. The dramatic irony was suffocating. Silas thought he was atoning by saving her. He had no idea he was delivering his own eulogy. The moment came during the foundational tribute, a video montage of Silas's charity work. Silas stepped back, smiling warmly at Queen, leaning in to whisper, "This is for us, Queen. Our new beginning." Queen didn't smile back. She stepped toward the podium. "Actually, Silas," she said, her voice clear and amplified by the lapel mic she'd secretly hot-wired to the house speakers. "There's one more video the world needs to see. A confession you forgot to give." The initial shock hit Silas like a physical blow. He froze, his hand still hovering near her arm. The audience shifted, a low murmur rippling through the room. Silas's eyes, usually so calm, flashed with a sudden jagged recognition. He saw the tablet in her hand. He saw the journalists from the Global Times standing up in the front row. 3 years ago, a girl was destroyed at the Sapphire Gala. Queen addressed the room, her voice gaining strength. She was silenced by a billionaire's checkbook and a predator's shadow. Tonight, that shadow disappears. The giant screens behind Silas flickered. It wasn't a montage of starving children or new hospitals. It was a digital map of the Sapphire Group's offshore accounts. It was a recording from the estate's library. Silas's own voice, cold and unrepentant, discussing the settlement for his victims. And then, the final blow, a live video feed from her father's new garage. Her father sat there, holding the original Thorne Tech predatory contracts, flanked by Leo Vance. The silence in the ballroom was deafening. Silas turned to the screen, his face draining of color until he looked like a marble statue of his own hubris. He realized the truth in real time. Queen hadn't been his assistant for months. She had been his executioner. Witnesses gasped as the evidence scrolled by, bank transfers, NDAs, and the forensic trail of a decade-long scheme to dismantle small businesses like her father's. One of the Peace Prize committee members stood up in disgust. Silas turned to Queen, his mask completely shattered. "I gave you everything," he hissed, his voice cracking. "I saved your mother. I built your family back up." "You didn't save them, Silas," Queen replied, looking him dead in the eye. You just gave back a fraction of what you stole. You don't get a prize for returning the blood you drained. Pause. The consequences were immediate. 2 plainclothes officers, coordinated by Leo Vance, stepped onto the stage. The saint was led away in handcuffs, his silver cross swinging mockingly against his chest. The cameras captured every second of his fall. The witnesses, the very elite Silas had groomed, didn't move to help him. They turned their backs, a silent, social execution. As he was led past the front row, he looked back at Queen one last time, expecting to see a face full of spite. But Queen stood with a dignity that silenced the room. She didn't look triumphant. She looked finished. As the chaos of the ballroom erupted behind her, Queen walked out of the pier and into the cool night air. She pulled the $2.4 million sapphire ring off her finger and handed it to a stunned charity representative at the door. "For the victims," she said simply. In that moment, she realized she didn't need a fiery revenge. The justice wasn't in the handcuffs. It was in the fact that her mother was sleeping soundly in a bed Silas didn't own. It was in the fact that her brother was at Stanford on a scholarship she had earned for him, not one Silas had gifted. The revenge wasn't the goal. Her family's peace was. She had taken the broken pieces of her life and built a fortress that no billionaire could ever breach again. The painful chapter was finally closed. She breathed in the city air, and for the first time in 1,095 days, it didn't taste like ash. The billionaire priest became the biggest scandal of the decade, a cautionary tale about the intersection of greed and grace. But for Queen, he was just a man who had underestimated the power of the person he thought he had broken. The confrontation is over. Queen chose to expose him on the world's biggest stage rather than taking a private settlement or seeking a more violent end. Do you feel satisfied with how this played out? Or would you have wanted Queen to do something different? Would you have kept the ring? There's no wrong answer here. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. When the dust settles on a fallen empire, the only thing left standing is the character of the person who survived the wreckage. The fall of Silas Thorne was as swift as it was absolute. Within 48 hours of the gala, the saint of Silicon Valley was stripped of his titles, his priesthood, and his reputation. The Vatican moved instantly to laicize him, severing all ties. The legal system was even less forgiving. Federal prosecutors used the digital breadcrumbs Queen left them to freeze his assets, nearly $1.2 billion in tech shares and properties, pending a massive racketeering and assault investigation. Silas traded his tailored silk cassocks for an orange jumpsuit in a high-security detention center. His social circle, once filled with presidents and icons, vanished like mist. In jail, he is no longer a billionaire. He is just inmate number 4092. The man who thought he could buy heaven is now spending his days in a 6 by 9 foot cell, facing a projected 25 to 30 years without parole. While Silas's world shrank, Queen's expanded. She didn't stay in the shadows of the scandal. She was appointed as the court-ordered trustee for a significant portion of the liquidated Thorne Miller assets. She rebranded the foundation as the Queen's Grace Initiative, focusing solely on supporting victims of corporate abuse and predatory debt. She isn't just a survivor anymore. She's an industry leader. She was recently named to the Forbes 30 Under 30 list, not for the money she took, but for the justice she distributed. Her father's garage is now the most successful independent auto firm in the state, and her brother, Marcus, is on track to graduate at the top of his class at Stanford. The Thorne name is a stain on history, but the Queen name is a symbol of hope. Looking back, Queen often reflects on the sheer irony of her journey. She spent 3 years terrified of Silas's voice, only to realize that it was his voice that eventually gave her the key to her own power. She learned that hardship doesn't just build character. It reveals it. The girl who entered that marble estate was a victim. The woman who left was a titan. She doesn't feel gratitude for Silas's cruelty, but she acknowledges the strength it forced her to develop. She understands now that the gift of the struggle was the realization that she could never be bought again. The most poignant moment of vindication happened last month. Queen visited her father at the shop. He was working on a vintage car, his hands covered in grease, the same motor oil scent that defined her childhood. He looked at her, then at the news on the TV showing the latest update on Silas's trial. He didn't say a word. He just wiped his hands on a rag and hugged her. For the first time, he didn't look like a man who had lost his business. He looked like a father who had regained his pride through the daughter he named a queen. Her brother, Marcus, views the whole ordeal with a wisdom beyond his years. He once told her, Silas thought he was playing God, but he forgot that even in the Bible, the ones who build towers to reach the sky always end up in the ruins. Today, Silas Thorne sits in a cold visitor's room, waiting for lawyers who rarely show up. His empire is being auctioned off piece by piece to pay for the reparations of the families he destroyed. Queen lives in a modest but beautiful home overlooking the city, a home she bought with her own earned salary. She still works long hours, but now she chooses who she works for. Her mother is healthy, her father is proud, and her brother is thriving. The silence of her new life isn't a haunted silence anymore. It's the sound of a life well built, stone by stone, on a foundation of truth rather than a bed of lies. The story of the billionaire priest is a reminder that the loudest prayers can't drown out the quietest truths. Queen's journey from the shadows to the spotlight proves that you don't need $1 billion to change the world. You just need the courage to refuse a lie. Looking at where everyone ended up, Queen in her own power and Silas in a prison cell. Do you believe in karma? Or do you think this was just the natural consequence of the choices they made? I want to hear your perspective in the comments below. Wealth isn't what you have in your bank account. It's what you have left after you've lost every single dollar. As we look at the wreckage of Silas Thorne's empire and the rising sun of Queen's new life, we're forced to confront a truth that many of us spend a lifetime trying to avoid. True success has nothing to do with the height of your pedestal. It has everything to do with the depth of your foundation. Silas built a tower of gold on a swamp of lies. It looked magnificent, but it was hollow. Queen, on the other hand, built her life on the solid rock of integrity, even when she had to crawl through the dirt to find it. This story teaches us that the real meaning of worth is found in character, not circumstances. Justice wasn't served the moment the handcuffs clicked shut on Silas's wrists. It was served every morning Queen woke up and chose to be excellent instead of vindictive. If you were to sit down with Queen today, she wouldn't tell you a story of revenge. She'd tell you a story of reclamation. She views her journey now not as a tragedy, but as a masterclass in resilience. I used to think my attacker was the most powerful man in the world, she recently told an audience of young law students. But I realized he was just a man with a lot of noise. The most powerful person in the room is the one who doesn't need anyone's permission to be whole. Her advice to anyone in a similar situation is simple. Don't let your trauma define your trajectory. What matters most in life isn't what was taken from you, but what you refuse to give away. She defines true success as the ability to look in the mirror and not see the shadows of your past, but the light of your future. Queen has changed. The icy walls she built for survival have melted into a warm, fierce empathy. She no longer walks with the weight of a secret. She walks with the grace of a woman who has nothing left to hide. And look at the generational patterns she's broken. Her brother, Marcus, is entering a world where he doesn't have to fight for crumbs from a billionaire's table. He is stepping into a future paved by his sister's courage. The struggle didn't just prepare him. It instilled in him a set of values that no elite university could ever teach. He knows that integrity is a currency that never devalues. He is the living promise that the Queen family legacy is no longer about survival. It's about thriving. As for Silas Thorne, Queen rarely thinks of him. When she does, it's with a measured, almost clinical perspective. There is no bitterness. There is no triumph. There is only the quiet understanding that Silas was the architect of his own cage. He made choices, and those choices determined his destiny. Queen realized long ago that his opinion of her, whether he saw her as a victim, a tool, or a trophy, never actually mattered. The only opinion that could ever define her was her own. She is at peace with the journey. Every tear, every sleepless night in that mansion, every moment of fear was a payment toward her current freedom. It was a steep price, but standing where she is today, she knows she is worth every penny. So, what can we take away from this? What can you apply to your own life when you feel like the world is built against you? First, remember that your worth is not measured by someone else's standard. A billionaire might call you nothing, but a billionaire can be wrong. Second, understand that character is your only true armor. When everything else is stripped away, your job, your money, your reputation, your integrity is the only thing that will pull you through the fire. Temporary setbacks are often just the setup for a greater comeback. Queen was a waitress, a cleaner, and a data entry clerk before she was a titan. Those low moments weren't a waste of time. They were the training grounds for her strength. The most important lesson is this: love yourself through the transformation. Queen had to learn to love the broken version of herself before she could become the powerful one. She had to forgive herself for being a victim before she could become a victor. Success isn't about the destination. It's about who you become on the way there. It's about the quiet strength it takes to say no to a comfortable lie and yes to a difficult truth. Queen started as a girl who was afraid of a voice. She ended as a woman whose own voice changed the world. And that is a throne no one can ever take away. Thank you for staying with me through this incredible journey. This story was more than just a tale of wealth and revenge. It was a testament to the human spirit's ability to rise. If this story moved you, or if you found your own strength in the middle of a struggle, please share your story in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more in-depth stories of resilience and justice. Every click helps us bring more of these narratives to light. Until next time, remember, you are the architect of your own legacy. Build it with truth. I am the story keeper.